Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back, and we will now begin our keynote presentation session. We have three keynote presentations from three of our prestigious speakers. Please allow me to introduce them before we begin. First, we have Dr. Chi Eung-song, Senior Research Fellow of the Office of Sustainable Innovation Policy Research at STEPI. And next, Dr. Kyung-mo Sung, Head of the Office of Science and Technology Diplomacy and Security Research at STEPI. And last but not least, Julia Vu, a Senior Fellow of the Cyber Institute for Strategic Studies at the International Institute for Strategic Studies Asia. So now to kickstart the keynote presentation, I would like to invite our first keynote speaker. Please welcome Dr. Chi Eung-song, Senior Research Fellow of the Office of Sustainable Innovation Policy Research at STEPI. Please welcome with a big hand.
Good afternoon. Once again, this is Chi Eung-song, the Senior Research Fellow at STEPI, and as all you know, Science and Technology Policy Institute. And today I'm going to talk about Indo-Pacific and critical and emerging technology. Today I'm not going to talk about very serious kind of a content. I myself consider as some sort of a storyteller today, so sit back and please relax and do not fasten your seatbelt. So, okay. Yes, I'm going to talk about some geopolitics at first because when we are talking about the Indo-Pacific, in my opinion, I have to touch the concept of geopolitics very briefly. Yeah, there are some very important kind of a theories out there, but let me just start the rimland theory proposed by the Nicholas Spikeman at first, because as you can see, the regions, yes, the green colors, the Spikeman told this is some sort of a rimland, and this is very important and very strategic kind of region. If somebody can govern or rule out this rimland, then those kind of country or the power can rule and control the world. So it's very important. Unfortunately or unfortunately, I'm not so sure, but Korea belongs to this rimland, as you can see, and India and some ASEAN countries and the Middle East countries and most of European countries, as you can see. Yes, actually, the importance of Indo-Pacific is not a contemporary or new concept. Actually, Indo-Pacific has been very important and strategic regions during last few decades or centuries. But Korea actually did not have any chance to take a look at the Indo-Pacific region because of some many kind of regions. Because Korea was not active in advancing to out of bound our country. Most of our focus on the Korean Peninsula, as you know, because of the internal security issues we are facing in North Korea during last half century, and it's every kind of a black hole that absorbing every kind of issues, economics, politics, and diplomat, and security, defense, and everything. But very recently, Korea started looking at the Indo-Pacific as a very strategic kind of the region, because we are very actively participating in global trade and also many kind of diplomatic relationship with our partner countries. As you can see this picture, India is in the middle of the British Empire, and the British Empire and also Dutch. They are very big powers. They were big powers during 19th century and early 18th century, early 20th century, when they using the concept of East India companies. India has been the core country during the last few decades and centuries as a region. Okay, it's the very famous One Belt and One Road, and you can see the lines You see, yes, also very spread out in the Indo-Pacific. And this is the battleground of the Second World War. The left-hand side is the European one. The right-hand side is the Pacific one. So it means that in the region, Indo-Pacific and ASEAN, it's a very important and strategic kind of a ground. So the, yes, in this Second World War, so many battles happened in Europe and also the ASEAN region. But as you can see, this is some sort of battle in the rimland. So rimland is so important and strategic region once again. As this slide, actually, I'm in a little bit of a dilemma how I have to put the title of this slide, deja vu. Means that, yes, the right hand side, as we can see, the battle in the Second World War happened in the Pacific area and in the ASEAN, as you can see, Thailand, Indonesia, the Philippines, and the yes. The left-hand side, we can see the Indo-Pacific economic framework. Means that exactly same area, same the geopolitical spaces. Yes, Indo-Pacific is so important, but and at the same time, we can see this picture. Crude oil transit route means that very critical energy resources comes and goes through the Indo-Pacific. And also food and grain also, yes, same kind of a transit route. Now we can see and we can figure out Indo-Pacific is really, really important, not only the politics, but also in economics, energy, the grain, and everything. Yes. Then how the Indo-Pacific strategy comes out very recently, and why we have to talk about technology alliance in the context of Indo-Pacific strategy nowadays. In 2022, the U.S. government, exactly the White House, proposed Indo-Pacific strategy of the United States. Yeah, but historically, originally, it was a former Japanese Prime Minister late Abe Shinzo who initiated the concept of Indo-Pacific. He has some sort of addresses during some very important international conference in 2015, 2017, and he proposed that the Indo-Pacific concept. And Donald Trump, the former president of the United States, and now is a front runner the next election, he accepted this idea, and the United States proposed very prominent Indo-Pacific strategy of the United States in 2022. In this strategy, many times the U.S. government mentioned and made comments and they emphasized the importance of critical and emerging technology. As you can see first, the Indo-Pacific should be free and open. And also, the Indo-Pacific, we have to have some sort of a common approaches to the critical and emerging technology. United States emphasized the importance of critical and emerging technology. And Korea, along with Japan and Australia, Philippines and Thailand, been considered as very important partners in the Indo-Pacific strategy of the United States. Next one. Yes. And also United States, they emphasize the importance of security. And here also, United States also emphasized the importance of critical and emerging technology areas many times. And as we all know that the Indo-Pacific strategy, people that Indo-Pacific the economic framework, United States, Japan, Australia, and India, they formed the Quad. In 2021, the summit, the Quad summit, and those four countries also emphasized the importance of critical and the emerging technology at the same time. In 2023, once again, the critical and emerging technology is emphasized by the Quad member countries. Now, yes, as mentioned, the US and China is a very critical and severe kind of race in order to grab some sort of a technological superiority with each other. The United States, in order to respond to the Chinese kind of initiatives, United States proposed some sort of chip four alliance. Korea, Taiwan, and then Japan is very important of a partner for the United States. As mentioned, United States actually invited the Korean companies like Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix. Very recently, Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix they announced their plan and intention to invest a lot of the financial resources into United States, and now they are doing building up the manufacturing facilities in United States territory. And United States government also decided to provide some subsidy to Samsung Electronics very recently. The amount, huge amount of money, and the most important one is that Samsung may provide the semiconductor to the defense, the Department of Defense. It means that Samsung Electronics can be some sort of a defense kind of a partner with the US, and I think it is very meaningful kind of a the comments done by high level government official from the United States. Anyway, South Korea, Taiwan, and Japan is a very critical kind of a partners for United States. And I'm not so sure how the global value chain of the chips will change, but Korea hopes and also plan to play a major role in those kind of reshuffling of the global value chains of the semiconductor. Yes, and also Korea and the US agreed to have some sort of dialogue on critical and emerging technology. It's a new alliance, and then we can call it or we can consider it some sort of a technology alliance initiated and formed by the United States at this moment. US currently has a three or four kind of platforms in terms of a dialogue. First, US has US Singapore Critical and Emerging Technology Dialogue, and then US also has the Critical and Emerging Technology Dialogue with India, and US and Korea also. But last year, I remember that United States proposed that. How about join India into US Korea Critical and Emerging Technology Dialogue? And this year, I remember it was March or April, US, Korea, and India, three countries, we have critical and emerging technology dialogue altogether. And what are they talking about? This is some sort of a items of a list of the cooperation. For example, US Singapore, the dialogue, AI, artificial intelligence and the digital and data, biotechnology, critical infra and supply chain, defense, and quantum. And US India, R&D, quantum, defense, space, advanced telecom, and semiconductor. I'd like to focus on the last keyword, semiconductor here. And next, US Korea. The first one item is semiconductor, technology and supply chain, and biotech and manufacturing, battery and clean energy, quantum, AI, digital, and ICT. And then what Korea, US, and India discussed together early this year, semiconductor, telecom and digital, AI and quantum, space, advanced materials and critical minerals, defense, biotechnology, and pharmaceutical supply chains. Please focus on the semiconductor. Here, this is the current status of India in terms of semiconductor. Indian government actually they decided to inject more than 15 billion US dollar into semiconductor, and soon to be first state of the art fair. The manufacturing facilities will break ground in 2024. Means that India officially starts participating in the chips manufacturing. Yes, maybe India cannot produce the high tech, the most advanced kind of a semiconductor right away. But who knows? In 1983, when Samsung announced that Samsung is going to participate in the chip manufacturing, nobody, virtually nobody, not everybody, most people actually they could not anticipate that the Samsung would be the top runner in manufacturing, chips manufacturing industry in the globally 40 years ago. And how about 40 years later? Who knows? India would be the front runner of the manufacturing, the semiconductor, the globally. Who knows that? India has that kind of a potential, I think. This time, the India has the partnership with Taiwan's PSMC, the power chip semiconductor, even though it's not TSMC, but we have to focus on the partnership between India and Taiwan. And I remember that Indian government consistently and continuously proposed the Korean government at the same time Samsung Electronics that invest in India and build up manufacturing facilities in India. I think we have to have that kind of a opportunity appropriately. Who knows? India already has very good talent in terms of a semiconductor. India houses 20% of global talent in chip design. Means that the design, India has the capability, Korea has the manufacturing capacity. So India and Korea can be a very good partner at this moment. But who knows? We have to have some sort of be a severe competition for some days, but nowadays we can have a very good kind of partnership, and I think this is the right time for Korea to move into that kind of direction. Yeah, AMD, Applied Materials, Lam Research, and Micron Technology, they already started investing in Korea and build up some sort of infrastructure in India. And how about the bio industry in India? The largest supplier of DPT, missiles, and BCG vaccines. That's India. And India developed world's first DNA vaccine against COVID-19. And also the second highest number of US FDA approved manufacturing plants outside of the USA. And also India is a very, very important kind of partners to the European countries and US in terms of a biosimilar and the generics in the uh, kind of every kind of a bio industry at this moment. But for example, Korea is very strong and powerhouse in terms of a chip manufacturing, but India has just started the participating in the chip industry. On the contrary, India is big power in terms of the bio industry, more focusing on the medicines. But Korea actually is more like a late kind of starter in terms of a bio industry. So very complementary one. The bio industry, India go ahead and Korea follows up. In the semiconductor, Korea is a powerhouse and India just the rookie. So we can have very good kind of a relationship with each other. As I can, as I showed you at this slide, geopolitics, India is the core of the Indo-Pacific strategy. That's why the U.S. government strongly emphasized the relationship, the partnership, cooperation with India in the Indo-Pacific framework, economic framework. At the same time, Indo-Pacific strategy. Nowadays, Indo is more like a G3 countries. When I visited India, I can witness how the world, the other countries, they consider India. India is very confident by itself that we can have a very important role in the international politics and economics and diplomats and also defense. So we have to think about India once again. I'm sorry, I'm not today. I don't mention about the Canada and Australia. I'm sorry because we don't have an Indian representative here, but we have very good relationship and the strong kind of tie with Canada, Australia, and US. But India, yeah, relatively a weak kind of a ties and relationship at this moment in terms of a economic status and political status two countries have in global society. That's why I like to emphasize India at this moment. Maybe later, if I have any more chance, then maybe I can talk about Canada and Australia and US more. Anyway, yes, that's all I have to say today. A keyword: Indo-Pacific technology, India, and critical technology, critical and emerging technology, and it's time to move on for Korea. I think if we lose this chance, then maybe we cannot catch up fastly. But even though the strongest kind of feature of Korea is that pali catch up rapidly. Anyway, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Song, for this significant presentation introducing critical and unique opportunities of the trilateral cooperation and also exploring potential avenues for further collaboration. Thank you once again. And now for our next keynote presentation, we are very delighted to hear from Dr. Kyungmo Sung, head of the Office of Science and Technology Diplomacy and Security Research at STEPI. Please welcome him up to the stage.
네, Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Dr. Sung Kyung-mo from the Office of S&T Diplomacy and Security Research at STEPI. I would like to thank everybody for joining us today in spite of your very busy schedule. Today, I will talk about the basic concept of National Strategic Technology Information Analysis System in the emerging security area and talk about the national security and national S&T strategy. Between a nation's technology and national security, there is a very important relationship. Let me go back in history when science became an instrument of domination. During the Second World War, science played a very important role. During this war, scientists were involved in designing and improving new military technology, such as nuclear fission technology, and Dr. Niels Bohr, Pierre, and Marie Curie on nuclear fission contributed significantly to the development of nuclear bomb by the US DoD. And UK historian David Edgerton talked about nationalization of science regarding this American case. And Edgerton said that science has been used to service the national defense capability. During the 1920s and 30s, remote sensing and electronics technology were invented, and that led to the invention of radar technology, and Allies quickly mastered radar technology better than the Germans. And since 1945, the US and Soviet Union engaged in fierce competition over recruiting former Nazi scientists. During the Cold War, the US and the Soviet Union competed not only over nuclear weapons, but also in national defense system and information control capabilities in the space flight field. Thanks to military mandates, certain industries such as semiconductors and computers survived against the market logic and then started a second life as producers of daily consumer goods in the 1950s and 1960s. Through this, the ICT technology that survived in the private sector became the base of the war economy. In 1966, the United States put an embargo against the export of computers to France because computing technology at that time was very effective in deterring the nuclear development. So France wanted to develop independent technology, and that led to the American embargo of export of computers to France. Amy Dahan, who was a researcher, she said that science that this was a policy decision that reflected the special characteristics of the economy in the war era, and RAND Corporation was established. Institute of Defense Analysis was also established, involving such prestigious universities as MIT and California Institute of Technology. And Amy Dahan called this movement the University Military Industry Complex. Throughout history, critical technologies were used to mean technologies aimed at gaining an advantage in war, and critical technologies also had a great impact on the development of national economies and international trade. And countries that competed for global hegemony have direct or indirectly experience the profound fear that delays in acquiring critical technologies could result in them falling behind in the race to sustain their governments. In the 14th World Economic Forum, according to the Global Economy Report, there's digital threat that burdens the organization. So for emerging technologies, when the dependency increases, the technology companies' vulnerability can go up, especially this chart that you're looking at, number 1, 2, 3 rankings. These threats were non-traditional threats, and they have led to new definition of critical technology in Korea. Up until now, in the multilateral trade regime that includes Korea, free trade prospered in many countries, and such countries, through such trade, wanted to maximize their benefits by centering their activities around critical technology. However, the definition has changed. Now, within the geopolitical context, technology that promotes competition among nations are defined as critical technology. Against this backdrop, STEPI is now, based on various prior research, believes that critical and emerging technology can be a threat to a nation. And STEPI currently is carrying out National Strategic Technology Diagnosis and Analysis System research study. And this is to establish the concept of Korea's critical technology needed in emerging security era and to build up a national strategic technology information analysis system that can identify the characteristics and security issues of specific critical technology. In this study, the term national strategic technology is used to denote the meaning of technology that aligns with the national interest of the Korean government, which is different from the concept of critical technology developed in the United States. When we select certain technology, make financial investment, and decide the strategy, there is a need to prioritize the specific technology. And our hypothesis was to develop that kind of basis, and we need a system to do so. We believe that the system should be called National Strategic Technology System, and based on synthetic biology of selected strategic technologies, we will go over this case centering around synthetic biology. This is table 1, and this is the national security components and data analysis results, stage 1. The current government pursues 3 major national security goals across 5 key areas: diplomacy, national defense, inter-Korean relations, economic security, and emerging security. The government selected 12 national strategic technologies in 3 areas, and they are matched to the national assignments. National security mandate around this related key words, we looked at the data analysis results, and we have identified security that showed the highest probability. National Strategic Technology Assessment, and there's the security issues and security characteristics, and our research team has established the following system. So we looked at security indicators, especially the traditional security indicators in the realm of diplomacy and security, and we have interviewed 21 experts in the field. Our research team has asked questions to the 21 experts and asked them to choose 0 to 100% for 5 areas and select one out of these. When we looked at the average score for the questions, and experts believe that synthetic tech bio has been given 80%, which was the highest score. So this looks at non-traditional indicators in the realm of diplomacy and security. We wanted to validate the synthetic biology in this area. We looked at the same questions, and the average score showed that experts among non-traditional indicators believe that synthetic biology has 94.05% impact on national health, followed by environment and security and energy security, which showed 79.76%. In National Strategy Technology Information Analysis System, we looked at the main results of the surveys and research related to national strategic technology for synthetic biology, and it was found out to have the highest potential for dual use through military and security indicators, and governments around the world are increasingly recognizing the cooperation with industry is important. Third, the dual-use process of synthetic biology requires a system that comprehensively addresses research ethics and international norms related to biosafety. For non-traditional security area, this is the result of our synthetic biology study. As a non-traditional security indicator, synthetic biology has the highest impact on health security. mRNA-based vaccines using synthetic biology can be considered a technology example that alleviates health security risks that have increased due to failure to predict existing infectious diseases. The development of strategic technologies to mitigate health security risks that have grown due to prediction failure should be supported by resilience-based system design that adapts and mitigates to improve traditional risk management. For synthetic biology, we looked at traditional security realm and non-traditional security realm, and these are main implications. First, Korea needs to deepen its understanding and conduct further research on the dual-use nature of synthetic biology, looking for niche areas. And regarding dual-use nature of synthetic biology, we need to focus on product management system to change the relationship between the government and the private sector. And this means that national security and technology relationship is becoming increasingly complicated. And science community security stakeholders might engage in a controversy or debate on this matter. Therefore, in the international competition, science and technology collaboration might become a more comprehensive issue, and going forward, governments around the world, including the South Korean government, would have to deepen their participation and deliberation in this matter. The nature of relationship between government and industry is evolving with a focus on dual-use technology and their related product management system. And it's important to understand the potential risks posed by non-traditional security, such as health risks, and is essential before embarking on R&D strategic technologies like synthetic biology. To accomplish this, it is crucial for relevant experts and think tanks to play a more active role. Thank you very much for your attention.
And shedding light on the fundamental concepts and frameworks that can shape the future of SNT and national security in this new era. Thank you. And now for our last presentation, please welcome Ms. Julia Vu, a senior fellow of the Cyber Institute for Strategic Studies at the International Institute for Strategic Studies Asia. Please welcome with a big hand.
Thank you, everybody. I'd just like to apologize in advance for my terrible slides. Everyone has got wonderful images on theirs. Mine is just literally Times New Roman bullet points. But yeah, so I'm the head of the Cyber Power and Future Conflict Program at IISS. I'm based in Singapore, but it's an international think tank headquartered in the UK. And my institute primarily focuses on issues to do with conflict. And so today I would like to talk to you about threats in cyberspace, which is obviously key to the discussion around science and emerging technologies. So over the next 20 minutes max, I'm going to take you through a few key issues as highlighted in the opening remarks and the remarks from Dr. Song and Dr. Sung. Technology is at the center of geopolitical competition. It is a source of power that amplifies the levers of powers that all states have to different extents. But it's also a source of huge vulnerability, and I'm going to focus on that. Cyberspace, which is the domain in which a majority of these technologies that my colleagues have been talking about will play out, and the existing challenges that we face that are present today and will only be exacerbated when these new technologies come into the market. So there are three kind of chunks to this presentation. First, I'm going to explain what I mean when I talk about threats in cyberspace. So I'm not just interested in hackers, state-backed or otherwise, but also the information environment and the physical infrastructure that underpins it. So threats in today's cyber landscape are often considered separately in terms of like national strategies and approaches. But physical attacks against the systems that underpin our economies and ability to communicate are also key to think about. And then cyber attacks against the virtual systems that sit on top of the digital infrastructure that we can see and feel are part of this broader picture. But then on top of that, it's information operations. And we've all been very, I guess, made aware of the disinformation campaigns surrounding elections and the concerns there. But those operations that leverage the virtual spaces that these systems create to influence our minds and our perspectives, I think it's important to look at it holistically. And then secondly, I will go to talk about the intersection of wider technological developments and how that is and may impact threats in cyberspace. And then finally, I'm going to look ahead and have a focus on kind of the differences in capabilities and resources in the region, and also the bridging of silos in terms of the way that we think about the threats. So I'm going to start, this is my best slide. This is, nothing gets better than this one, I'm sorry. So let's start from the bottom up. When I think about cyberspace, I kind of break it into 3 layers. And so the bottom layer is the physical layer. And so here we can see attacks contesting the physical infrastructure of cyberspace. And it's the, not really reflected on this slide, but satellites, servers, data centers, mobile towers, and of course the terrestrial and undersea cables. And so I've been looking a lot of the data on submarine cable disruptions over the past decade. A lot of them happen, particularly in this region surrounding the Ring of Fire, which is the colorful map to the left, and also particularly in the region with the incredibly busy shipping lanes. But how are they disrupted? So curiously, I think there's a myth that a lot of the disruptions that occurred to the submarine cables are due to sharks. But if you look at the International Committee for the Protection of Cables, 65 to 75% of these fiber optic cable disruptions occur because of man-made reasons. Now, they're not all malicious. It could be, it could be a submarine cable that's specifically designed to cut submarine cables. It also could be a trawler, an innocent kind of fishing activity, or a not so innocent fishing activity. So, in contested waters in the South China Sea, gray zone activities using ostensibly civilian craft to carry out state objectives is known. And you can see a number of instances in Europe where it is suspected that Russia is doing the same thing. And so we're seeing more examples of disruptions to these critical connections. And so the severance of these submarine cables, which tends to also run alongside energy pipelines, can have detrimental effects to the economy. That historically, I think in other parts of the world, disruptions have resulted in telecommunications company paying out millions in compensation to those affected by the cuts. In instances where the pipeline next to the fiber optic cable has been cut, the act has also contributed to a national energy crisis. And so, when it comes to, what happens in this to countries that have their submarine cables disrupted, it can vary hugely. You have very well-connected countries in the region that have huge redundancy. So if something is cut, it can just be rerouted. But there are other countries that just have 1 or 2 links. And so then there's and this is like a continuous theme, I think, when we think about cooperation in the region, is the huge spectrum of capability and the vulnerability of different countries. I was thinking recently in December, Vietnam has 5 cables. At this one point, they all needed to be fixed. And when they are disrupted, they are rerouted, and sometimes it's rerouted through a terrestrial cable that goes through China. And I think this is true for a number of other countries as well. So I think it's important to think not just of the act of the disruption, but also what happens following the disruption. But actually, cutting off access to cables is a pretty aggressive act if it's intentional, and it's something that is also hard to prove. So obviously, they're vulnerable to tapping. There's a long history of tapping submarine cables. And over the past 10 years, there's also been a change in the profile of the suppliers and operators of the cables. So in addition to American tech giants becoming players in the submarine cable system, obviously, there are also Chinese companies that have grown in their role in laying and operating these cables. And as we've seen in terms of government efforts to intervene here, there's US Team Telecom who put a pin in the Pacific Light Network, which would have been the highest capacity cable connecting the US to Asia, which had a landing point in Hong Kong. And so that was prevented from going forward. There's a lot of, my kind of point here, let me change slide, is that they're highly vulnerable, but you don't even need to go into the middle of the ocean to tap these cables or disrupt them. You can just go to the landing station. Here's a picture of a landing station. Very low security. It's a huge, there's a variation as well in terms of how well these landing stations are protected. And so what I'm trying to say is that in summary, the physical layer is hugely vulnerable, it's increasingly disrupted, and it's hard to attribute. So let's move up a layer to the second layer, which I describe as the logical layer, and talk about recent trends in cyber operations. So, okay, so here I'm talking about the infiltration or disruption of computer systems through, malware, ransomware, phishing, DDoS, distributed denial of service attacks, to name a few. And the intent, and primarily I focus on state-backed cyber operations. So the intent driving these operations varies a lot. They're also not mutually exclusive. Sometimes you need to do one to have the other, like espionage. But states conduct them for different reasons: industrial espionage, financial gain, commercial gain, to have cyber physical effects, to take down critical infrastructure, and also for surveillance. And over the years, the threat approach has changed. And I just want to highlight two of them in terms of access. So one is that, as governments and industry and other organizations have grown their awareness of cyber threats, cybersecurity is taken more seriously, many are hardening their networks, the attackers are evolving their tactics and techniques. And so there are two, I think, points of vulnerability that are being actively exploited by a lot of APTs right now. One is supply chain attacks, so threat actors taking advantage of the networks of suppliers and vendors and partners connected to the end target organization to gain unauthorized access to those systems and data. And so by exploiting the weakest link in that chain, attackers are finding a way to their final end goal. And so there has been the kind of governments and the larger companies that have the resources to build their cyber capabilities are, I guess, better defended than the smaller companies that are supplying like a little bit of accounting software or a digital certificate. And those are the ones that are being targeted increasingly. Another point of access is with many organizations focusing on patching higher severity vulnerabilities. Actors are now going for the lower severity vulnerabilities that are not being patched or deprioritized. And then once the actors have access, they've adapted their technique so that they can remain undetected. And so that means that they are using kind of tools that are native to the environment in which they're in. And so if you were looking at the system, it'd be much harder to identify whether or not this is legitimate or malicious activity. Over the years, the actors also have changed. So, increasingly initially I'm interested in state-backed actors, but also there are criminal groups, transnational organized crime groups utilizing cyberspace to facilitate their scams, like the pig butchering scam in Southeast Asia, and also state actors using criminal networks to launder stolen funds, like cryptocurrency, as well as hackers for hire. And I think that also makes it harder when it's actually a state actor behind a hacker for hire organization. It's harder to attribute that operation. And as we have seen with Ukraine, there are hacktivists that are getting involved, but not officially linked to the state, but carry out operations that are in some way sanctioned by the state. You can also see that with Iran and Israel. So in the logical layer, like the physical layer, significant vulnerabilities and a variation in the national approaches to building cyber resilience, and also partnerships with industry vary a lot as well. So up to my final layer, which is information operations in cyberspace, and that occurs on the virtual layer. So, we see a range of operations here that are intended to inflame existing divisions, repeat narratives, through disinformation, and as well as many other attacks that are designed to intimidate, such as hacktivism, discredit through hack and leak operations. And it's tricky here because I think with the discussion around disinformation, I think there is maybe a disagreement in academic circles on whether or not they have impact. There's a party on one side that says, it doesn't have an impact, and others on the other side that do. And it's my view that these campaigns have the potential to influence perspectives, but not in isolation. And so disinformation, as many of you know, relies on pre-existing characteristics or conditions, existing political biases, lower media literacy levels, a lack of societal trust in institutions, and highly emotional or sensational nature of the content, to name a few. And so given these intertwined conditions, it's hard to isolate the effect of a disinformation campaign by itself. And that actually kind of worries me a little, because I think that in some places, some governments, when you're thinking about allocating budget to defenses, often they want hard stats on what is the impact of this. And that is sometimes hard to find. However, I think it seems implausible to suggest that disinformation campaigns have no effect at all. We are, to some extent, shaped by the media that we consume through the devices in our hands, and whether it's malicious or not. And to dismiss it, I think, is in a way to overlook the proven impact of multi-million-dollar advertising and marketing campaigns, which also shape public attitudes and behaviors. So, and I might just skip over the second bit, which is the emerging tech side, but basically, there are pros and cons to these technologies. We could use them to enhance our defenses. They're also going to exploit our vulnerabilities. They're dual-use technologies. And so let me just go to the final bit, which is around looking ahead. So, in terms of threats, all three layers, the threats are going to grow. They're already pretty significant. The introduction of 5G, etc., and IoTs greatly expand, and just actually the rate of connectivity of the other 50% of the world that is yet to come online, that kind of attack surface growing is kind of outpacing national governments and partners' ability to build in cyber resilience. Because cyber threats are borderless, we are seeing more instances of bilateral cooperation, multilateral exercises, and there's a whole range of partnerships when it comes to building cyber defenses, whether or not it's just the kind of low-hanging fruit, kind of, in some cases not that low, of information sharing, and others actually being on the network with your partner to defend against a third country. I think the challenges within the region is that there's a huge range in capabilities. We have the extremely cyber capable countries, and in kind of groupings, if I think of ASEAN, etc., there are one or two countries who are extremely capable when it comes to cyber defenses and are actually funding a lot of the initiatives around defending against cyber attacks and information operations. And it's not clear how sustainable that is. There's also different economic and political calculations, when it comes to deciding on the bottom line, who is going to be the supplier, and also obviously everyone has a slightly different calculation, particularly in Southeast Asia when it comes to China. And then the final thing that I just want to close on is this siloed thinking and the need to be holistic. I can see that a number of the multilateral conversations look at physical submarine cables, as well as cyber resilience and cyber technical collaboration. But I think it's also important to think about the virtual space and the information operations, because if we look at the frameworks that Russia and China use, cyber electronic warfare, psychological operations, and information operations are components of a broader information domain in which, I guess, strategies are designed. And so often I think we miss wider actions if we just look at subsets of it. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Julia Vu, for the informative presentation, touching upon the importance of international cooperation in addressing cyberspace challenges. And I'd like to thank all of our keynote speakers for sharing your excellent knowledge and in-depth information with us. Thank you once again. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we will now proceed on with a 15-minute break to cool things off a bit. Next up, we will have a panel discussion with various experts at 3:15. We encourage you to join us for what promises to be enlightening dialogue at 3:15. So please enjoy your break, and we'll see you in a moment.